Oh, here we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Arlene with Beacons of Balance, and this is our guest speaker, Simon Caudullo. Am I pronouncing that right?
You did,
Caudullo?
yes.
Caudullo,
Thank you.
okay. Linda is not with us today. She has a conflict with scheduling, so you'll just have to deal with me in any event. So I want to introduce Simon to you. He is an ordained spiritualist minister, a healer, and a teacher. Actually, he's a former Benedictine monk, which I can't wait to talk about that, and has spent most of his life in the social work field until he went from being a monk to a social worker in the social field. And then he was director and manager of the Beverly Hills Ballet. He felt he was born a medium, and he's a graduate of the School of Spiritual Healing in Lilydale, which is Lilydale, New York. So, Simon, now tell us, how did you go from being a Benedictine monk, and how long were you a Benedictine monk for?
I was connected for 10 years. I was in vows for 3 years, I think. Left just before solemn vows. Had gone in very young. In those days, it was pre-Vatican II, so I'm dating myself a little bit. And it was something that I always knew that I wanted to do. And our family was not, I mean, we're Catholic, but no one went to church. But,
Oh,
like I was about 5 years old, and I remember people saying, well, what do you want to do, when you grow up? And I was like, well, I want to be a brother for 6 years. I want to be a priest for 6 years, and I want to be a missionary for 6 years. I had no idea what any of that was about. I think that's reflective. Now I look back and I think that was kind of past lives that I was connecting to. And
mhm.
when I've done some past life stuff with people, it always comes up that I was a monk, clergy. I always is always connected with past lives with me. So I think at 5 I was picking that up. And they say that children up to around the age of 5 see spirit, hear spirit. And we should always encourage children, but all too often we play them down and say, "Oh, don't say that. That's not okay."
Well, I
And
I definitely believe that, because going back to Catholicism, I mean, that's when you had your first sacrament. They called it, what, the age of reason, and that was like a 7.
exactly,
And
exactly.
a lot of the culture follows that. Like, children, once they hit 7, they kind of lose that grasp,
Well,
and
one of the other things that I didn't put down in my bio is that I'm a single parent. And in raising my daughter, who's now 28, or will be 28, when she saw spirit, I always encouraged her.
how
And
wonderful. What a
yeah, yeah.
gift.
And she was very connected, and that's that beauty, at 3 and 4, they see spirit.
Yeah. Does she still have that connection?
We don't lose it. We don't lose it, but many times people choose not to. When she hit that teenage years, she's like, Papa, I just want to be normal like my friends. But she's an incredible healer, and we don't lose that. In terms of mediumship, and we're all born psychic. We're all born psychic, and anybody can
Correct.
develop this gift. It's one of the things that I teach weekly in a class that I do. It's the case of developing, and I talk about the language of spirit, and it's developing that language so that we understand it. I know for myself as a very young person, I was constantly told that I was sensitive. Oh, you're too sensitive. You're too sensitive. And it became like something that I became ashamed of.
Sure.
I think that we now are starting to understand that being sensitive can be a beautiful thing. The empath,
Yes. Yes.
is that connection. And when we're empathic, we have all these wonderful gifts and we're not aware of them. And people can be somewhat afraid of us as well because of
Well,
that.
I think I don't know your age in that, but we're probably from around the same sort of arena, time frame, that back then, you just didn't talk about it as a child or whatever. I had deja vu like every day. I didn't know what it was. And I couldn't go to my parents. They'd probably knock me off the side of my head and say, you,
Right.
you know what I mean? So you just kind of kept it here. I had heard of the definition between, or psychic and medium. They say a psychic is more that could tell you like past, present, future. They use tarot cards and different things. and a medium is more involved with the afterlife and connecting with the souls that have crossed over and bringing messages. They say a medium can be both medium and a psychic, but psychic is not, it's just psychic. They're not necessarily a medium. I don't know if that holds any truth for you or rings true or no.
Well, I believe, and there's lots of different feelings about this, but I believe that we can all be a medium. It is a matter of training. It's just like anybody can play the piano, but not everybody is going to be a concert pianist. And I think that's where the difference is. So we all have the ability, we are all psychic, okay? And developing the medium is a process of work that we have to bring about.
I agree with you because we all get our intuition. We all get that, you know, if I facilitate different groups in that. And of course, when you get that hit, that gut instinct is your initial, and I always say, everybody rely on that. That's your truth. But then we go up here to our brain and we start analyzing and extrapolating and pulling it apart and trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, I always say that, like till about the age of 7, we are like sponges. And then what happens, we send children off to school, and then everything is left brain. And the right brain, where intuition lives, where creativity, where the intuitiveness begins, is pushed down.
Mhm.
And the left brain is raised. So it's about education and that. And so I do feel like it's done purposely because we don't want to have everybody not having to rely on government or religion to follow their path. In fact, all we have to do is go within, and we can do what's best for ourselves then.
So are you more involved with mediumship as far as when you do your, you know, readings and so forth? Are you more connected with spirit from the other side, or do you also cross over to give people insight to what's going on in their life? Or be it, you know, everybody wants to know about relationships and jobs and their finances, it seems, you know?
So as a registered medium in Lilydale, it's a 2-year process that we go through. So to speak, we're vetted during those 2 years. There are so many services and things that we have to, and we're judged, and then we're passed. And so as a registered medium in Lilydale, it is my job to give evidence of spirit. And so I'm an evidential medium. Now, in terms of the psychic, when we say hello to our client, good morning, how are you? That's psychic. We're getting into the psychic. So there's this kind of flow that goes back and forth, and
I
we
love
never.
you're doing this. This is the balance. See, that's what
Yeah,
beats the balance.
yeah, and so there's always that back and forth. We'll go in and out, and I believe that we shouldn't put so much emphasis on whether that's psychic or that's mediumistic, because they all blend together.
So how long were you, again, how long were you a Benedictine monk
About
for?
10 years, yeah,
About
connected
10 years.
years. Yeah,
And
it was a process.
so
And
what had made you change? Because then you went into social work right after that.
no,
And
as a monk, I was in charge of different things. I was in charge of the apple orchard and the Christmas tree farm, and so it was a lot of that. And then at one point, we operated a retreat house, and the older monks wanted a younger monk to come in because we were giving retreats to teenagers. And so they wanted someone that they could relate to. And so I was brought into that. And that began, I think, that social work that was, I think, the beginning. I had taken social work and psychology in college. So this was a good mix for me, and that was the beginning of it. But after I left the monastery, I found myself connected to St. Vincent's Hospital in the village, Greenwich Village, which isn't there any longer, shame. And they had one of the first alcoholic programs, detox programs, and so I was involved in that for many years, working with alcoholics, and then moved to the psych floor, and then eventually day hospital. So I worked both with psychiatric patients and alcoholic and drug abuse.
that's very, very challenging.
It is,
It's very
because we
challenging.
know that the disease of alcoholism is about denial. And
Mhm.
so you have to break through that. And the person has to give up drinking for themselves, not for their loved ones.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so
Where were you? Where was the monastery? Because you
the
said,
monastery, well, they had bounced us a little bit. So the house that I belonged to was in Newton, New Jersey.
mhm.
I did my novitiate in Morristown, New Jersey, and I had gone to school in Indiana as well, the St. Meinrad's, another Benedictine house. So
How long were you involved with social? So when you got out, you went in social work. How long were you involved with that?
about 15 years.
Uh-huh.
And then my partner and I, he was a ballet dancer, and we opened a ballet school in the Hamptons, and it became very successful. And then he was like, I need help. And I was kind of like getting burnt out. At that point, I was director of a home for emotionally and mentally challenged adults. And so I then became a manager for Southampton Ballet and
Yeah.
Dance Arts, which was our school and ballet company.
So because you said you got burnt out, how did you, in working in that field, because that's heavy duty, how did you bring balance to yourself? What brought you, um, from what you were working with and then not bringing it home, but coming home to your partner into that business? How did you bring yourself?
One of the things that we learned very early on was to leave it at work. So to leave all those feelings, everything that was going on, to leave it at work and not to bring it home. Don't talk about it. Let it go. And that was very important. And then of course, as an empath, it's so important to have time alone, just to have that time alone. Whatever it is that you're doing, to just have time alone so that you can kind of regain and balance yourself again.
Sure, because and you're working with that energy, and that energy is very heavy duty. And
Yeah,
I know it well from
I was
past
thinking you do. Yes.
from past situations that. So then, in your bio it said that you were a born medium. So did you always delve into it? Did you acknowledge it and use it, or
Well,
did you
very
work with
early,
people?
I
Mhm.
used to see angels and feel them around, and they would tell me things. And so I remember once saying to a cousin something, and I guess it was something he was doing, and they were acknowledging it, and he was not happy with that he had been found out, and he said, "They're going to lock you up. You keep talking like this, and they're going to lock you up." And I was about seven.
You saying
Yeah.
it to you? Oh,
Yeah, I was about 7 or 8, and I had just shut it down
so you
because
shut it off. Yeah.
yeah, that was just too frightening for me,
Yeah.
and I just kind of shut it down.
So
And
when did you open back up? When did you open back up to it?
in in Catholicism, we talk about the delayed vocation, and I feel like in many ways I was that delayed vocation. I really didn't get back into this work maybe 20 years ago, and then I started looking at it again. And I'd gone to a psychic medium, and we were sitting there, and I could hear his thoughts. I knew what he was thinking, and he stopped and he goes, "You're a clairaudient." And I thought, "Oh, what's that?" I had no idea this was the terminology he was using. And he's like, "You could do what I'm doing." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't think so." And he's like, "Yes, you could." So he was that encouraging force for me to start looking at what these gifts, we talk about gifts, some prefer to use the word abilities. And that's when I started looking at it a little bit.
You said you had mentioned also that you saw. Do you actually see physically? Do you see when you saw angels? Did you see them? Well, I mean, angels appear different ways, of course, but
So we talk about two ways of seeing things as a clairvoyant. One is where we physically see them.
mhm, that's
Okay.
what I'm
And
asking. Yeah, or
right.
you could
And
see
the
them.
other is we see them in our mind's
Right.
eye. And so many times when I'm doing a reading, I can see the loved one and I can describe what they look like. And then the sitter will say, yes, that's exactly, the way they looked, and that's exactly the way they were. Because of my psych background, the way spirit works with me many times is to give me personality. And so I will give the sitter their loved one's personality and all the intricate parts of that personality.
So are you seeing it more in your mind, the
Well,
visual, or are you actually seeing physicality, seeing them
It's
appear.
all of that. So I'm clairvoyant, so I see spirit mostly in my mind's eye. I'm clairaudio, so I hear spirit. I'm clairsentient, I feel it.
Yeah.
And then claircognizance is that's kind of knowing. You don't know why you know it, but you just know it. And that's kind of the newest clair. Only around maybe 20 years, 25 years. The others are much older. And there are other clairs as well. Scent, you can smell spirit,
Yes,
take.
I've had that.
Yeah.
And sometimes the scent isn't that pleasant and they play
Sometimes
tricks
it's
with you.
not. Yeah.
I've had that happen. So that's pretty,
Especially you get a cigar smoker, on the other side.
yes, yeah, definitely. Anyway, was your partner, was he into the spirit
He was very
realm?
spiritual, but we didn't talk about it. We didn't talk about it in those days. We talked about ballet, we talked about the kids under our care, but it wasn't until the end of his life that he started to talk about that. And he would say, I know you're very sensitive. He always gave me more credit than I thought that I should have. Because I thought he was also very sensitive. He was able to see spirit towards the end of his life. He described his his birth mother had passed, and we were headed down to Florida. And he said to me once we got down there, he said, "There's been a spirit around." And I thought, oh my God, this guy's really going bonkers. And I wasn't involved in any of this yet. And he's like, I can't tell who they are. I just know they're about 350 pounds, and they've been with us since the car ride. And I thought, oh, I think we got to get him checked. Well, in those days, they didn't have cell phones. And until we got back to New York, we had gone to Florida for vacation. We found out that his birth mother had passed during that time that he saw her. Um,
Wow.
and so I became aware how sensitive he was.
Were you there when he crossed? Were you there?
I was, yes, I was. And interestingly enough, our daughter was there, and she was 2.5. And once he crossed, I had brought her upstairs, and he downstairs. And when I got up to her, my friend was watching her. She was crying and screaming. And this was a child that never did any of that. And she was saying, I want to go with Dad in the spaceship. She
She
saw,
saw, she
yeah, she
saw
saw the light and
the
attributed.
light does she have
So
any recall of that or?
I don't, at 2.5, I don't think she has recollection of that.
Yeah, because my father appeared to my son when he was 3, and I talked to him about it. Of course, he's an adult now, but he doesn't remember. But it was very vivid. It was very it frightened
Right,
him because he woke up, and he explained he saw him totally.
right, right.
And he was 3 coming down the stairs. He was screaming, and I of course was alarmed. He said, and I heard the front door opening. It was a whole thing going out, energy. And he
Right.
said, "Mine, don't let the man with the uniform in the truck get me." And what 3, he didn't know the words. So I was just,
Yes.
and my father had an oil business and he always wore a uniform and he loved his truck. So I knew that's who it was. And I just picked him up and I said, "Don't worry, it's okay." And
Yeah.
it was fine. He was just checking in with, to see him.
Right. Right.
Pretty amazing, but they do see. Yeah.
And that's why I say I think children we have to pay so much attention to them and give them the credit for that, because we either open them up or we close them down.
So listeners out there, or viewers, listeners, both, it is important for your children, grandchildren, or whatever to keep that line of communication. Don't mock them and laugh at them. They have a lot of information. Talk to them. It's really amazing and important. So I'm going to ask you some little personal questions here as far as, was it easier for you to come out, or which was harder, easier for you to come out to your family as far as being a psychic medium, or coming out to saying that you were gay? And I don't mean no offense or anything, but I mean, it's just, life.
Um,
Was it more
after,
difficult, one or the other?
yeah, I didn't have to deal with, I really didn't have to deal with either of them when it came to
Oh,
family.
okay.
I remember my parents showing up to my first apartment, and I was already living with a young man, and they were having coffee, or my father was having coffee, my mother and I. My partner wasn't there, and my father said, "Well, what are you doing today?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm painting the bedroom." And he's like, my father was a painter. He said, "I'll help you." And so we moved the one queen size bed. So he knew, and he was very Italian guy, he loved me because I was his son, and it didn't matter. My mother had a little bit more problem with that, I have to say. She was always hoping, that I would find a good woman.
A good one will straighten you out. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
My last partner, we were together for 20 years. And even after his death, my mother was still hoping.
Really?
Yeah. So it was hard for her, and she felt like it would make it easier for me if I, would be straight and that I would have a
Mm,
woman. And she didn't understand what was important was that I be who I am and how I
exactly.
She was also very psychic. She had the gift of telepathy, and we would communicate that way. Many times we didn't need a phone. It was quite interesting. Both my sisters are. I don't know about my brother, and we don't talk about it. So I'm not sure where he stands with that.
How do they feel about you being a psychic medium? Then how were they accepting of it, your sister and brother?
Yeah, I think my sisters are very accepting. I've given readings to them and to other family members. So I think for the most part, some of them said, well, we knew that you were always that way. Well, I don't know what they saw that I didn't know, but a big Italian family, and I think they were very accepting that way.
Where were you in the lineage with them? Were you the eldest, medium, or middle?
I'm the second oldest. Yeah, I'm the
Or the,
oldest son and
the
second
oldest
oldest.
son? A lot of times, well, like you said, we do have the ability, but a lot of times family members will have it, and they're together. So the message, what I would like also being a medium in that, how do you bring balance to people that you read for and share? How do you think doing mediumship brings balance to people, or how could it bring balance to the
I
client?
think that the key word actually, and as a medium, this is what I feel that we bring to the sitter is healing. I feel that it is important for us to be able to connect the spirit world with them because many times the connections were not when perhaps the father left and that there was no emotions that were ever expressed, no I love yous, no I'm proud of you. And so when you connect those two together, lots of times there are apologies that come through from the spirit world, and they're very specific. And that is what I feel as mediums in Lilydale. I feel that I give that sitter those connections, that healing begins. There are many times there will be somebody that has passed from a suicide. And sometimes it's a seemingly a suicide, drug use.
Right.
And when I speak with the spirit, they will say, I've used this drug a million times, and this is the first time I'm on the other side. I woke up, I'm on the other side. So they didn't understand. And the sitter will say, we wondered, we didn't think that they would have committed suicide. They were happy. And
Yeah.
so we have these things that are laced with drugs, fentanyl, and a lot of that. But to be able to make that connection, and so then that parent knows that the child didn't actively take their life, that's such a gift that you're giving somebody. And that I think is the word that I would use. And perhaps then there is a balancing out of emotions and
Yeah.
feelings.
How wonderful. No, it's true. And that's a very profound message, because I think many of us leave. I know I did for a long time. And I thought I had resolved. My father passed when I was 18. I was very angry. And yeah, he was an alcoholic. And intellectually, I analyzed and I said the word, I thought I forgave him, but it was in here. It took quite
Right.
a while. But then when I made that realization, it was quick, and the signs I had were incredible. So
Yeah.
I think for our viewers and our listeners, it's never too late. And just because a soul crosses over and you haven't had closure, you could still do that.
I would also say to our listeners, it's so important to release those feelings now while your loved ones are still,
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
so that you don't have to use a medium as an intermediate to get that message through.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell somebody that you love them. You know, so, it sounds like such a simple thing, but
It's
if we're not
difficult for
raised,
people.
yeah,
It's
if we're
difficult
not
for a lot of
raised with
people.
expressing our feelings, then we don't. We keep them down, and we think it's normal just not to talk about it.
I don't know if you know the words of Mother Teresa, but I remember years back watching news reporters that went over to India to help her. Or actually, they were doing a report. And, news reporters, they don't emote. They just kind of give the news, they're focused and whatever. But I could see it in their eyes when they were talking about what they had witnessed and everything. And they said to her before they left, they said, what could we do when we go back to the States to help you, over here and do the, and she looked at them, she said, forget me, forget what you've seen. She said, you go into the nucleus of your own family and you heal. She said, if you cannot do that, see, I remember these words. She goes, if you cannot do that, you can't do anything for anyone and there'll never be world peace. Those words never left me. In fact, I have it stitched on a pillow. And
Yeah.
I remember it was so sobering to me. I finished that watching it and I said to myself, holy crow. I mean, I have a big, enormous amount of friends and everybody, we get along. And I'm thinking, oh my God, my own nucleus of my immediate family, which many, they're fractured and things are left unsaid. You have anger, all this. And I'm like, how true, how true.
When we do that, then we begin to heal us. And that's what mediumship is about. The other thing about mediumship is it is a path to finding ourselves. And in anything that we do, it is about giving back to ourselves. Everything that anybody does is so important that they find the path to themselves so that they understand who they are. And in doing that, then they're giving to everybody because we're all connected. We know that now. We know that this globe that we live in is really quite small, and we are all connected in this web to one another. So what we do for ourselves, we're doing for others. The good that we do for ourselves, we do for others. So
Definitely, definitely. I just say, yeah, we're all one. I mean, if you're in a room with anybody, I mean, as we're breathing in each other, right? We have share the same breath. It's in and out, doesn't matter.
right.
So people,
That's
if they're
right.
so small brained that they don't think that, it's kind of crazy. Simon, I know you're busy and I really appreciate you taking the time for us and share this. It's so wonderful. And down below, we will have your link, Rev Simon, right, at yahoo.com. That's the best way
Yes.
to contact you. You're at Lilydale. So we'll have that information. Reach out to Simon, have a reading with them. It'd be wonderful. And I want to thank all our listeners for spending time with us today and for watching, listening. And please subscribe. Leave comments, tell us what you like, don't like, or whatever like to hear in the future. And as I always say, remember to be the change you'd like to be, because that's where it begins. And from our hearts to yours, in total love, peace, harmony, that's what it's all about. I always say, if we have inner peace, we have it all. You don't need anything else. So till next time, namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.